And welcome back. This is World Talks coming to you live from Warsaw. Russian gas deliveries to Europe via Ukraine had ceased on Wednesday morning. What will be the long and short-term consequences of this halt as at the end of an era of Russian dominance on the energy market? To discuss, I'm joined here this morning by Andreas Umland, an analyst from the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So let me start with a quote. With more than 500 billion cubic meters of LNG produced each year globally, the replacement of around 14 billion cubic meters of Russian gas transiting via Ukraine should have a marginal impact on EU natural gas prices. So this is what Bloomberg wrote after a source from the European Commission. So do you think that this statement is accurate? Will this impact be marginal?
Yes, I think for Europe as a whole, this is not a big development. I'm somewhat reminded of 2022 when Russia cut the gas supplies via Nord Stream 1. And there were lots of fears that this would trigger a major crisis in Europe. And even that direct gas supply to Germany then did eventually not have major consequences. It did mean a rise of prices in Germany, but Germany actually relatively quickly adapted to this new situation. Now we have these further developments in the delivery of gas to Slovakia, to Transnistria. And this is also going to have repercussions for these countries or for this region, Transnistria, and for Moldova as a whole. But I think the adaptation will be happening, and this is a major shift now in the geoeconomics of Eastern Europe that will eventually be to the benefit even of these regions or countries that are now most directly affected by it.
So Ukraine has hailed this move as Russia's biggest defeat. However, some EU countries are already scrambling to meet their energy needs. You've already mentioned Slovakia. Of course, we also have Moldova. So which countries are these and why they were not better prepared for this shift that has been announced quite some time ago, right, by Volodymyr Zelensky?
Yes, one is surprised why there has been not an earlier adaptation to the new situation after the war that started in 2014 escalated in 2022. In fact, already in 2014, it should have become clear that things are changing, but Germany actually signed in 2015 then the Nord Stream 2 contract and started building together with Russia these further pipelines, gas pipelines that never went into operation. The Nord Stream 2 was built, but never actually operated as a gas pipeline. And also other countries, they simply missed the story, and they thought that economic issues are somehow separate from political issues, and even separate from war, and even separate from large-scale war, which started in 2022. And there was plenty of time, now almost 3 years, to prepare for that. But the countries or the regions, in the case of Transnistria, did not do that. And now the adaptation is going to be painful, but better late than never.
Right, so let's zoom in on Slovakia before we move on to Moldova. So Fico threatened Zelensky, right, with retaliatory measures. Do you think that Slovakia will do something? Because so far nothing has happened, right?
I hope not. I hope this is just rhetoric, and I hope also that there will be then pressure from Brussels, perhaps also from national capitals of other EU countries on Slovakia to refrain from such measures, which would be, of course, a step in the back of Ukraine during this war, and would be scandalous. In fact, development, I'm somewhat, as Fico is now taking this peculiar position, making these statements, going to Moscow, meeting Putin, and so on, I'm somewhat reminded, actually, of the of the dubious developments that we had in the 1990s in Slovakia, when, unlike other Central and East European countries, then Slovakia was not on the path towards the European Union and NATO under Mečiar, and it only went into this direction after the Czech Republic and Poland and Hungary had made progress in their rapprochement with NATO and the European Union. And so Slovakia was then a latecomer, and now I think we see a little bit a resurgence of this initial problem with Slovakia, where the commitment to Western values, to the European Union, to NATO, and so on is somewhat more ambivalent than in other new member countries. Something similar, of course, happened also in Hungary earlier. So Fico is following here in some ways the example of Hungary. But I hope this will not go through, and that he will just remain with his statements and will not actually make any material decisions.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, Hungary gets majority of its gas via the Turk Stream, right? But still, this was an issue for Viktor Orban. He was trying to try and circumvent this measure by perhaps rebranding gas as Hungarian. Why is this so important for him?
Well, there is probably the price factor, that this pipeline gas from Russia is not as expensive as gas via other routes or as LNG. But there's also a play here, a certain geopolitical play, both by Orban and Fico, that they want to have their own little foreign policy contrary to the priorities of the European Union or of NATO. And perhaps that they also want to profile themselves as independent players on their domestic political scenes and get some benefits out of it. The example of Hungary shows now that this is a risky path, and that there are costs for these sort of aberrations from the general Western foreign economic policies. And so Orban is now losing support in opinion polls, and is getting, so to say, now the bill for his independence in quotation marks. And one hopes that something like that will also happen to Fico, and that he will not benefit from this domestically, but rather suffer from it on the domestic political scene.
Right, and would you say that a change in leadership is necessary for Hungary to sort of come back to the EU, to stop being a pariah, to stop being this enfant terrible? Or could this happen under Orban?
I'm not an expert, to be frank, on Hungarian politics, but the way that Orban has now behaved over several years, and he has boycotted EU policies towards Ukraine. He has sabotaged Ukrainian-Hungarian relations. He has boycotted NATO cooperation with Ukraine, and he has, has had this special relationship with Putin, and so on. So I think he has now gone very far, also in domestic affairs, of course. And I can't see him really making a shift back to a more proper European Western political stance. I'm afraid for Hungary, at least. Maybe that's not the case for Slovakia. There will have to be a change of leadership. And there is now actually indication that this may happen sooner or later, as in the opinion polls, as I mentioned, Orban is losing.
Right, and with Peter Magyar and his TISA party being an alternative, a potential alternative. Now, I mean, let's turn to Moldova, because this is a fascinating case. Basically, the country is facing a security crisis right now, right after the breakaway enclave of Transnistria was cut off from supplies of Russian gas. And just to explain, Transnistria provides electricity to the rest of Moldova, about 80%, if I'm not mistaken. And this comes from a power plant, sort of gas-fired power plant, and the gas comes from Russia, right? Just to sort of make that clear for our viewers. So what's next for Moldova? Who will help Moldova out?
I hope that the European Union, I'm not in the details, frankly, about how much there has been preparation for that, but that there is a plan B to bring at least Moldova now through the rest of the winter, and then to reboot basically the whole energy supply system in Moldova. This gas relationship between Transnistria and Russia was actually the modus operandi of this whole Transnistria experiment, if you want to call it, and maybe it's now coming to an end in that Russia has been supplying to Transnistria gas, and this has not been paid for by Transnistria, and it has come sort of on the account of Moldova, because even Russia has not recognized Transnistria as an independent unit, as an independent republic. But Moldova has, of course, also not paid for it because the Moldovan government, because it does not control Transnistria. So there's now a huge debt formally accumulated by Moldova, at least in the Russian interpretation, for 3 decades, basically, of supply of gas to Transnistria. I think Gazprom will not get this money back that it has lost, basically. But that was the price, so to say, that Russia has paid for this imperial experiment in Transnistria. And my feeling is that this is now coming to an end, and that basically the Transnistrians, like the Armenians before or the Syrians before, will learn that being an ally of Russia is not, at the end of the day, is not a good strategic decision.
I was actually going to ask you about comparison to what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2023, but you've already said that. So Russia is not a reliable ally, I guess we can establish that firmly. But let me turn to the money for a moment, because, of course, Gazprom is losing revenue over this, about 5 billion. This is what some analysts are saying. But Ukraine is also losing money. So do you think that this will be a consideration moving forward for Ukraine, for instance?
Well, for Ukraine, these schemes of the Russian gas flowing to Slovakia or to Transnistria, they were always dubious, and they had a certain, aftertaste. Let's put it that way. In that, yes, Ukraine was collecting transportation fees from Russia for this gas, and that was a source of income for Ukraine. But indirectly, of course, Ukraine was thereby also co-financing a war by Russia against Ukraine by these payments into, or by not co-financing, but it was in a way promoting the Russian imperial schemes or the Russian ways to influence Europe. It was assisting in a way Russia in that. It's now losing this income from the transportation, but on the other hand, it's also cutting Russia off these partners in Europe, and so for Ukraine, I think it's also a strategically good decision.
So because we're running out of time, just one last question and a yes or no answer. Is this the end of an era of Russian dominance when it comes to energy market?
Yes, this started already in 2022 when the Nord Stream 1 pipeline was, the operation was stopped by Putin, and then, as you know, it was later blown up, already not functioning. And now with these cuts of the gas deliveries to Moldova and Transnistria, indeed, this is an end of an era.
So I take it as a yes. Andreas Umland, thank you, sir, for being with us this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.